FAQs that we will send out and to be uploaded on our website. The question continues, will face coverings be required? The answer is yes. At every point in time where we cannot practice social distance. And, we will be creative as we can in our classrooms to create that. We will see that we will implement structured movement within our schools, and I'll speak a little bit of that in a little bit. But, will staff and, one of the questions, will students and staff have to wear masks all day? We will wear masks when appropriate, in those particular areas. We will have an embed breaks to be able to help and assist our students, and but we will be able to, from our implementation plan, there will be an approved exemptions that apply to individuals that I will discuss here in a little bit. The exemptions will work through individuals that are observing social distancing per the CDC guidelines. They will be related to impairments due to existing health conditions. We will make certain that we have accommodations to the hearing impaired, and also if there's any any elements that will impede the instructional process as well, we will take action to be able to help those learners continue to interact along the way to protect them. And then what happens if a child forgets their mask or loses or damages their mask? We will be there to provide ongoing disposable masks along the way to every one of our students. And the question that Ms. Lewis said, it's all about the enforcement. What happens if a student refuses to wear? Our first step is to make sure we provide the mask to our learner and educate them about the importance of wearing our face coverings. And at the same time, we want to, if that learner continues to refuse, then we will actively engage our parents to make sure they truly understand the overall expectation, the impact as well. And if we transition to move forward, we will make certain that we continue to educate our parents along the way about what other opportunities we will have to educate our learners. Once again, we have many options under Model A, whether it's in brick and mortar, whether it's through e-learning, or whether it's through Hillsborough Virtual. We will find the right placement for that learner to help them be successful every single day. One of the things we will not do, and I'll tell you openly, we will not be suspending children for this. It's more about an educational platform. We will make this fun at a primary and intermediate level. We know that we can see some really cool masks, but we got to make certain that they are aligned and appropriate with our dress code, so they're not disruptive in any way, shape, or form within our schools. And then, how long will this be in effect? We'll continue to monitor COVID, and we see that if there continues to be an upward trajectory, of cases, then we will make the informed decision to maintain. If we see that there's a significant decline, then we will, once again, I will connect with local specialists and experts to be able to make a decision to release and potentially relax when the time may be right. So what is next steps related to mass implementation? Provide explicit training to school-based staff and about expectations and how we will implement this plan. I will have some time with principals during a Zoom meeting to have those conversations, and then we will look at identifying a point person at every one of our schools to have one point person for COVID-19 that will address any COVID issues, so there's a funnel of consistent communication. We will build a COVID-19 rapid response team to be able to coordinate all efforts when a positive test is validated within our school. How do we launch, and our safety and security be actively engaged in that process? And we will build a contact tracking system with the district safety and security team to coordinate all of our local efforts in communication with the health department. And then we're going to launch an aggressive public service announcement campaign that talks about the healthy status and talk about implementation of masks and how that would not only protect their learner, their families, and also our employees along the way. Another tough decision we had to make is yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
You have such a robust
PowerPoint
agenda today
yes,
with your comments, which is very helpful, and
yes,
we
ma'am.
very much appreciative. But I thought maybe we would break it up because board members will have comments and questions.
Sure.
And so maybe we could section it out
Yes,
and go ahead and talk about the mask
Yes, ma'am.
requirement first and
Yes, ma'am.
address any questions that board members might have based on that. So board members, if you'd
Yes,
like
ma'am.
to get in the queue and if you have any questions about the mask requirement, that this would be the opportunity for you to make comments or ask questions about that. And I know we have a couple already in the queue, so we'll start with board member Perez.
I want to thank you first, because I know I received a lot of calls regarding this
Yes, ma'am.
mask, and I have a comment to make.
Yes.
Okay, so COVID-19 has put a different face on education today. It's our duty and responsibility to create the healthiest and the safest environment possible, especially when we have students, teachers, and administration who are dealing with issues such as diabetes, obesity, celiac disease, and asthma, just to name a few, and cancer and lupus in adults. Not to mention the mental health impact COVID-19 has had on our students. They have been experiencing anxiety symptoms, which are positively correlated with increased concerns about academic delays, economic effects of the pandemic, and impacts on daily life. Furthermore, among the many students, the pandemic worsened the pre-existing mental health conditions, mainly due to school closures, loss of routine, and restricted social connections. I'm currently the only board member who works in, has contact with, and sees on a daily basis the effects COVID-19 has on the members of our Hillsborough County community. Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act requires that we maintain our students' safety while on school campus, maintaining all classroom doors locked while the students are in the classrooms for their safety. The AC systems in the majority of our schools are not equipped with air filtration systems, air purification systems. We are the 7th largest district in the nation, the 3rd in the state, with 225,000 students and 25,000 employees. In a state where, as of today, we have a total of 213,794 total positive COVID cases, and we continue to rise. I would not want our district to be the petri dish for COVID-19 amongst our students. And if you feel that our students are immune to COVID-19, tell that to a 5-year-old boy in New York that died, a 13-day-old baby with no unknown underlying health conditions who passed away, or all the children nationwide who have become ill from COVID-19. We have to understand that social distancing and everyday preventive behaviors remain important for all age groups, and these do play an important role in disease transmission, especially for the majority of the students who are Black and brown, are the greatest impacted by COVID, and with the greatest number of coronavirus deaths, as well as the highest asthma rates. We must, as a community, start taking care of each other. A better way to put this into practice, as Stephen Covey said, seek first to understand, then to be understood. As we here in Hillsborough County contemplate returning to schools, we truly need to look at how the wearing of face masks will benefit our students in the long run, and how this will prevent the spread of infection. The classroom will be a space where the virus can spread, and let us not fool ourselves. And today, the day is the day to balance the costs and practicality of wearing the mask. And remember, our students and our teachers' health depends on it. So I want to thank you for making this very, very hard decision today.
Thank you. Thank you, Member Perez. And of course, Superintendent Davis, feel free to respond to any comments or questions that board members have. I want to say that Ms. Gray is next, followed by Ms. Stewart, and then Ms. Schamberger. And we will go ahead and go to Ms. Gray for comment.
Okay. Thank you, Superintendent Davis, for, I know it was a it was a tough move that you made today on the chessboard, and a necessary one. But I just had two questions, and since we're sticking just to mask wearing, I will only ask two. I like the idea that we're putting a mask, face mask descriptor under dress code, and if that be the way that we're going to communicate, can you can we look at that, not like a tagline, but will this be part of the dress code? Will you be writing that down as an official dress code? We're not talking policy, but can you share? I've heard it mentioned a few times.
Yes, ma'am, through the chair. So with this being, it's a temporary directive. So it's a decision that that I have made based on the current status of COVID, and this could be fluid. If we see that there's a downward spike over the next 5 weeks, and as we get to school, this could potentially change. But right now, I wouldn't say that it could be inclusive of the dress code. But I think for now, since we're in a temporary status and we're watching COVID, that I'm just going to leave it as a directive and expectation and requirement to our schools and to our students. And I do believe right now this is the best decision for our organization to protect our children. But we will continue to look and monitor COVID to determine if additional changes may be needed to be implemented within language.
And I just want to say that as a former teacher, when we combine these words of normalcy, dress code, it's part of your dress code, or if I tell my grandkids, it becomes expected, put your seatbelt on. And I like the way normalcy for kids, routine for kids, as you well know, is so critical. So I definitely like that identification. This is just part of your dress code, and put it on, etc. That's my remark. The other question I just had, say I'm a teacher, I wear my mask or a clear mask, and our students are wearing a mask, but I get sick because whatever, I just get sick for 2 weeks or so. As a teacher, will I have to use my sick leave, or how are we going to handle that?
Yes, ma'am, through the chair. Right now, the CARES Act transitions all the way to December 2020, and that protects employees that qualify, hit certain criterions within that act. And it will potentially, if they hit criterion, it will pay and cover some of that funding related to leave. But if individuals do not qualify, then they would potentially have to use their individualized leave. I'll say, Dr. Whalen, is there anything else that I've missed from that?
No, we would be exploring all of the leave options that employees would be afforded, and then use of their accrued time as well.
And if I could just submit an opinion as a former teacher, I think that would be an important point to share with our teachers, because they're very, very worried, and of course they should be. Thank you very much.
Okay. And through the chair, this is part of the process of the reopen plan. We've had phase 1 of the review, so we're working diligently, and hopefully over the next few days to be able to finalize all the FAQs that may be inclusive, that we've had from teachers, that we've had from leaders, that we've had from constituents, to be able to package that and be able to roll out and prepared for day 1. So that should be forthcoming.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
Thank you, Member Gray. And Mr. Davis, our next board member is Ms. Stewart, and then if we could add Ms. Schamberger to the queue, please. Thank you. Ms. Stewart?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess this is about setting expectations, so I appreciate your decision. I know it came down late, and I know a lot of people came here and wrote to us, called us, messaged us. Facebook blogs were going crazy today. I know even the CTA told me they had to shut down their Facebook page. There were so many responses about this topic. And I know that a lot of this is about expectations around sanitation, disinfecting, what happens if the safety of our students, and ultimately the instruction of academics. So I appreciate that we are being leaders in this, and that we are setting the expectation of health for not only our employees, but our student body, and ultimately for the community. I appreciate that due to the current order from the governor's office and the DOE, and the fact that we physically will not be able to socially distance every child on every campus. We just don't own enough real estate in this district to do so, that the mask order is probably the next thing that we can do to try and keep people as safe as possible. I believe this is what we should be doing, and the message that we should be sending across this community, that we too understand the urgency by which we slow the growth of the spike in this pandemic. And I don't expect that this is the final decision that we'll have to make as far as when schools open, how they open. I do have some concerns about some of the things that, and I've been shuffling things to your staff about the stuff that's coming to me as far as questions and concerns. And I know that they're being added to the FAQ. I don't know if on the FAQ there's a way for us to maybe color code or date the things as they come in, because I had some people today that said, well, I can't tell what's new and what's been there already. So if there's a way for us to segregate out, this is the new stuff that we got added as of this date or this time, or maybe we have a weekly update of the FAQ so that people can determine, because I'm pushing them back towards the FAQ before I start responding to stuff. You know, have you looked at the FAQ? Have you determined if your question has been answered in any shape or form? And then I saw some schools that were talking about on social media making this part of their dress code. And so I just want to make sure that our school leaders and principals and teachers understand this is not part of the policy. This is not dress code. This is a superintendent directive, and that we're monitoring what they are planning to do. And then I think we need to set some guidelines, and that's directly going to have to come from you because it's not a policy directed by the board. It's coming from you about what is acceptable in a face mask and what is not. I think we have some examples that have come into the media recently. I think Publix was part of a pretty big controversy about what their employees could and couldn't wear. So I think we just need to set some expectations. This is not dress code. We already have issues with dress code and what kids can and cannot wear to school, what teachers can and cannot wear to school. So I think this falls along the same line. Mine is colored, yours is surgical, his is black. What is acceptable and what's not? So if you can maybe address those, I don't know, in the communication that you get out to parents as we move forward. And again, I appreciate the communication and the press release. We've also got to think about, too, the people that are not getting this stuff. They're not getting our emails. They're not getting press releases. And how are we reaching out to those families that do not have that ability to get our information? Are we sending text messages versus just a parent link via email? I know that's an option in Parent Link. I would much rather get a text message. I'm going to see it a lot faster than I see an email. But and I see, Mr. Porter, you want to respond to my comments. But I just want to also have us consider some of those things as we move forward that continue to communicate to families that we're still in a process of making decisions as the pandemic and as the situation in Hillsborough County changes. So, thank you.
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I can
Porter?
address the issue about the
Absolutely.
dress code. So
Yes.
in the frequently asked questions that the superintendent released today, that is specifically addressed. And as the superintendent said, the dress code itself is not going to be amended because this is a fluid situation and can change. But I think it's important for everyone to understand what the expectation is regarding face masks. And I think it's important if I could take a moment to read what the dress code says and how the superintendent is going to expect it to be applied throughout the district. So can students and staff bring their own face coverings? The answer to that question is yes, even though the district will be providing face masks to students and staff. Face coverings must comply with the dress code found in the Code of Student Conduct, and this is the critical language, so that they do not disrupt school activities, number one. Number two, are not obscene or otherwise inflammatory, number two. And number three, do not endanger the health or safety of themselves or others. That's the current dress code as it applies to all clothing worn by students, T-shirts, hats, things like that. So the same standard is expected to be applied for face masks, and that will be enforced as the dress code is enforced.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. That was very helpful in clarifying that. So, Ms. Stewart, did you have any other questions? Okay. Mr. Davis, did you have anything you needed to add
No,
or
thank
respond? Okay, fantastic. I just want to give you an opportunity. All right, Ms. Schamberger?
Thank you so much, ma'am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Member Stewart asked my questions. I've received a lot of questions regarding what exactly will be considered a mask. So thank you so much for getting that clarified, Member Stewart. Mr. Superintendent, just as all of us have, we've all spoken with hundreds of constituents, concerned parents and families, and of course our teachers and staff over the last few days regarding the mandate on masks. As you know, many of these folks, their decision on whether they were going to return to school or not was really hinged upon your decision to mandate masks. So I just want to simply thank you so much for listening to this board, listening to the community, doing a fair amount of due diligence, meeting with experts, and making sure that this was the best decision. I am also pleased to hear that just as any learning opportunity for our students or staff, that any issues with wearing of masks will be handled restoratively, and certainly not punitively. I hope that the autonomy will be given to our school leaders to deal with these issues in the correct way. And lastly, as I'm sure you have already planned, as we move forward into August and we're actually living now in this reality, I hope that we will leave the doors open to allow our families and our teachers and our students even to keep the feedback open with us and with you so that we can adjust as necessary. But thank you again for making that hard and very courageous decision to mandate masks. I absolutely know that it was the right decision. So thank you, Superintendent.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schamberger. And the only thing I would like to add is, I appreciate how difficult this decision is to make, and what you have done to research the information behind it. I've gotten a lot of, obviously, like everyone else, I've gotten a lot of questions from constituents. I just want to make sure that we're, responsive to that. And so I appreciate you putting a sample of what the frequently asked questions or some of the questions will be. And I hope that we can get that and some of the details behind the initial layer of questions answered. I think probably the most common question I've gotten are about students with special needs and health conditions, and what parents are worried about with regard to that is that those students will be singled out because they're not wearing a mask. And how do we handle, any conflicts and any situations where students are made to feel different because they are not wearing a mask, maybe due to an existing medical condition or whatever reason that they have for the exemption that they have. And so that's a big concern for parents who have children with special needs or health conditions. And so I want to make sure that we get that information out to those parents. And then I think the other question is the discipline issue, is just making sure that we are very detailed and thoughtful about all of the different scenarios that can happen around disciplining students who aren't wearing a mask or who choose not to wear a mask, or how that's going to be handled. There's a lot of questions around that as well. And so do you have a time frame where you think that you might have the first version or first draft of the frequently asked questions available to the public? I apologize if you answered that. I was kind of taking notes and trying to multitask here. So
It's okay. Through the chair, you have really good questions. So that's what I extended to the board for sample FAQs is the first wave that we will put out. As you know, we will continue to take input from board members, from civic leaders, from school-based leaders, teachers, and parents that we can continue to update and address. Tomorrow I have a meeting with some district staff members to be able to go through this and have a better understanding about a conversation about implementation plans and how we will make certain that every child feels comfortable in how we're going to use restorative practices to help children better understand the implementation of the mask and help them along the way. We do know that there's going to be particular scenarios of exemptions that will have to be made, but we stand ready and prepared to make them.
Well, I appreciate that, and I know it's been said 100 times, and it'll probably be said 100 times more about how fluid this situation is. And I would like to, publicly ask our families and parents for the grace that's necessary and the patience that's necessary to get as much information. You've done a great job trying to push information out as much as you can and trying to answer every question that is posed. It's practically impossible to think of every single scenario, but somehow I know that you will probably be able to think of the majority of the scenarios and hopefully have answers for parents and give them some confidence in the fact that they can send their kids safely back to our brick and mortar schools. So thank you. And with that, I will move on to Dr. Hahn, who has questions or comments. Dr. Hahn?
Thank you. So I just want to say that, obviously I think what was demonstrated today with your decision was a clear commitment to making our students and our educators a priority around keeping them safe during this time. Thank you. Sorry. During this time, it's been a while since I've sat up here. During this time where it's very uncertain and people are overwhelmed and frightened, and concerned. And so I know that this was not an easy decision, but, I want to thank you for showing some true leadership this past week by reaching out to the business community, the healthcare community, and the nonprofits, as well as teachers, parents, and even students, to inform your decision making, because that's what's so important in a district this size, where we have so much diversity, to make sure that everyone's voice is heard and that we are using the data and input from the experts in our community to drive the decisions that we're making. So I appreciate that. You were very thoughtful in this decision. You showed that in this past week or two, and how you did engage with individuals across not just our community, but our state and our nation. So I appreciate your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hahn. And actually, before we move on to the next part of your presentation, we have time certain for employee input, and we do have 2 people that have signed up for employee input. And so we have Ms. Heidi Glick and Ms. Emily McQuay. And so if Ms. Glick could make her way up to the lectern. Welcome, Ms. Glick. You have 3 minutes.
So nice to be back. Heidi Glick, Alonzo High School. Oh, I forget this is on. The best high school in Hillsborough County. I do want to make sure we clarify that face shields are okay. Yep. We keep hearing masks, 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 and you said face coverings, and I got all excited, but you've heard enough praise. We don't want you to get a swelled head. This is important for me. When I wear this for hours and hours, I've tried it home. It makes me nuts. So kudos to you guys wearing them for as long as you have this evening. But I understand that when I'm lecturing, or I'm in the front of my room, or standing guard in my hallway, I can wear this. And when I am working one-on-one or in small groups, I would then put my mask on. And I speak for a lot of teachers who have been texting me, especially after this came out, that they want to make sure that we can wear these. This was $10. And I think it's awesome that you guys are providing things as far as masks are concerned, but you need to also think about providing us with shields, because I'm sure you can get them for much less. And I have one from my dentist. Well, he doesn't know I have one, but he probably does now because he has kids in the district. Sorry. That clip onto my glasses. And those are also awesome. They still come down, and that's even better than just this. So if you could look into that for your staff, that would really, really be appreciated. I also want to say that Dr. Linda Perdue sent you all an email that she would like to be part of the official public comment record. So I want to encourage all of you to read that, and I don't know how that becomes part of it. I'm sure you're getting a lot of other emails, but hers is very poignant. Thank you very much. Stay safe.
Thank you, Ms. Glick. And while we're cleaning the lectern, Mr. Porter can address that.
All email comments that are made during this time where we're doing hybrid meetings are made a part of the official record and reflected in the minutes.
Thank you very much. And that actually is going to conclude our employee input for this evening.
And I'll also add that to Ms. Glick's point as well, face coverings was the term chosen, not masks, to be inclusive of situations like the face shield.
Right.
Very well. Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Porter. All right. Sorry for the interruption there. I know we're... Thank you for being flexible. We appreciate that. And so if there are no other comments or questions from board members with regard to facial coverings, then we'll move on to the next segment of your presentation. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, and thank you. And I appreciate all the feedback from the board. Is how we grow together, and we'll look forward to continue to refine our efforts to make sure we get it right. And to our educators, face coverings, absolutely. We'll make certain those are going to be a part of some of our, in particular, classrooms with students with exceptional disabilities and needs, but we'll continue to grow and look into what the financial model may be, as I do agree it could be a great accessibility for our teachers as well. One of the other decisions that I had to make as a superintendent of schools was about graduation. And, I was very clear in May that my aspirations were to hold a traditional graduation for our seniors. We know that they have lost so much related to their high school career, and my heart goes out to each of them. I had a daughter last year that graduated, and there are so many moments that we remember. And I just think back about, as a parent, how I would feel for my daughter losing the homecomings, the proms, the senior breakfast, the graduations, and all those types of events. And so we really tried at the beginning of May to be very clear that we wanted to push back graduations to mid-July. However, as transition and seeing the continued movement of COVID, I had to make a really tough decision, and it was really unpopular. But it was one that was bigger than this organization. It was more about the community. And today, as I see that we're at record highs in the last few days related to the COVID, I honestly can put my pillow, on my head on my pillow at evening, knowing that I made the right decision in this, related to graduation. It still hurts. I have employees that sit on this front row that have graduates, and I feel for them, and I feel for every one of the graduates and seniors that I've spoken to and parents that I've spoken to. Know my heart's for you and with you, and we will do our best to make it a special event. So what we're going to do, that all schools will host a virtual graduation on July 25th. This is a Saturday at 1 p.m. That we have organized with a company to make certain that we provide a nice, thorough, thoughtful graduation ceremony for our children. It will have some of the same elements where it'll have, board members interactive. You'll see that you'll have the Val and Sal that will be interactive in that time. You will also have a message from the superintendent along with the principal, and be able to show and to demonstrate that that every learner will have an opportunity's name to be called. But we'll also be hosting another event to be hosted at every one of our schools with a graduation drive-through ceremony, and we're excited about that. We provided funding to our schools that will allow our learners to, with their families, to come up in their cars. The senior will be able to step out of his or her car and be invited to a stage in their cap and gown to be able to take a picture with the principal. And once we continue to practice the social distancing, and they able to take that mask off and take that special picture moment to be able to have that for a lifetime. But we'll have a celebration. I gave some funding to the school. Hope they have a DJ to make it fun, being creative with how we decorate our cars, and to have that awesome moment. But all of our virtual graduations will be hosted on each high school's website, along with the Hillsborough Schools District website as well. I'll stop.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. We do have a couple of comments or questions with regard to graduation ceremonies. And so, Mr. Kona?
You're right. Very difficult decision. It was graduations, and then it was mask, and then it's back to mask. And lots and lots of difficult decisions that we've had to make in a very short period of time. And we're still going to have difficult decisions that we're going to make. First of all, I'd like to thank you for giving our high schools some resources to actually put on these drive-by ceremonies. I think that's great. I'll be participating in Alonzo's, Lato's, and Sickle. So I'm excited to be part of the drive-through presentations, and look forward to recording my video. So thank you. I know it's not an easy decision, but I think as we continue through this pandemic, I think it was the right decision. And the fact that we are going and doing these drive-by ceremonies, I have a little bit more comfort that we are going to still continue to celebrate our seniors. So thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Member Kona. Member Gray?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This goes right back to the next steps for district staff. It was the page before the graduations. I don't know if I just wanted to share the next step, a suggestion.
Yes, ma'am.
And one of the things that I know Miami-Dade's doing with the safety back to school was the contact testing. Tracing, I'll get there. And what I thought we could do with the new family community centers that you're setting up is perhaps we can turn those centers into a CV testing site and or a contact tracing site. And the reason I'm saying that is because you're putting them in every neighborhood, and that would really facilitate equity, if you want to put it that way, but also I think it would be very practical. And we want families to have that which is needed in the safety department. We could put masks there, anything that would be related. I know already we have first aid, but just a thought. And I was just reading the next step, so I just wanted to make mention of that. And the graduation, it's all about the kids, and that was in your first thought. And I think, as we always have seen with graduations in our lifetime, children and families will make the best of what they have, and it will be a great occasion, not as maybe as glowing as a venue as we're used to having, but still it will be a very fine occasion. I'm confident. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Member Gray, Member Stewart, and then Member Schamberger, and then I have a comment as well.
Thank you. And just around thank you for making the virtual graduation piece available. I'm sure our parents and students appreciate that. Is there a way, I know my calendar's not up to date, I don't know about anybody else, but is there a way for us to get the drive-by graduation ceremonies updated on calendars so we can get all high schools to send in when they're doing this? I know they're extended times. Like I just heard from Chamberlain, there's this 8 to 1 on Tuesday, which is not what their original graduation was scheduled. But I know Gaither is having theirs on their original scheduled graduation date. So if we can get that information to our secretaries as soon as possible. I know we have filming we're supposed to do for the virtual piece, which is not until the 25th. But a lot of us would like to attend this stuff at the school site. So if we can get that to at least to Ms. Woods so that she can update calendars for us. So thank you. That was all.
Thank you, Member Stewart. Member Schamberger?
We get tomorrow's deadline.
Thank you so much. Mr. Superintendent, we've seen some very creative graduations around the country. We all have seen them. We've gotten a lot of questions about why can't we just host in-person, all-at-once graduations on our school sites. Every high school has a stadium. Can you help our community understand that decision to forego that option?
Yes, ma'am, to the chair. It's a really good question, and that's one that I've been receiving a lot of emails about. Why can't we hold it, outside in our football fields and other venues? And regardless if it's inside or outside, I agree that outside could potentially be better, but the issue becomes we can control graduates coming into the facility. We can also be very direct about, the guidelines while they're there. But however, when we start to have students and parents and family members transition outside of the facility, then starts the mass gatherings where you have individuals hugging each other, they're high-fiving each other, and then you start to get to a point where there has an increase of a potential spread, and then that infection virus can potentially grow. So we saw that in the paper, I believe 48 hours ago, an individual school had in another county had an outside graduation and immediately identified 18 cases of the coronavirus that was directly somewhat linked to that gathering. So, we looked at the Buck Stadium, we looked at the baseball stadium locally. Some of them were openly out of our affordability range. Others were just not available. And then we had an uptick in COVID. So just really trying to take a stance that protects the community and not being the lack of ability to control what happens after the ceremony, I think was the greatest concern of mine.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Schamberger. I just had a clarification question on your slide. I just want to make sure I understand this because I understand that all schools are doing a graduation drive-through, and I was actually meeting with some parents yesterday to talk about what their plan is for one of the high school graduations. And it sounds like they're going to have, it's going to be great. They're going to have like Station 1, Station 2, Station 3, and they're going to get their picture 6 feet away from their principal, but with their principal and their diploma and all the things that normally happen, but it's going to be staged out. Sounds like it's going to be staged out very well, and there's a lot of people who are really trying to help organize this and try and make it as special as possible for the students. And another hard decision I know that you had to make, and we're going to make lemonade out of these lemons. But help me understand. Okay, so all schools hosting a virtual graduation on July 25th at 1 p.m. Does that mean it's being broadcast on their each high school's web page?
Yes, ma'am.
At 1 o'clock on the 25th, and it's is it the same thing that the graduation drive-through is, or is it's totally different?
Yeah.
It's just they're doing the valedictorian and salutatorian speeches, the conferment, and it's like a slideshow basically
Yes, ma'am.
of all the graduates. Is that how I'm understanding that? And then the drive is they can do that differently, where they go up on stage, they say their name, they get their picture taken, and that type of thing. So two totally separate things.
That's correct.
Is that
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
I
Yes,
just
ma'am.
want to make sure I understand that for clarification. A lot of parents out there with questions, but I think we are going to do our best to make this as special as possible for our students. Okay. Any other questions or comments on graduation ceremonies from our board members? Good. Okay. Moving right along then.
The next piece is just that, every month we try to give an update on where we are from the tax referendum dollars and continue to thank our community. So this month, bring to the board, we'll have a couple roof replacements and at 3 of our elementary schools, and then we will be able to accept the lowest bid for playground replacement, which is up to $354,000. We'll be spending close to $3 million this month, and just wanted to make the highlight and let everyone know the actions that will be taken related to addressing millions of dollars of deferred maintenance, and how this community funding will allow us to take proactive steps to address our infrastructure needs. And then the big one here for reopening, with so many questions that we continue to get from parents, from stakeholders and leaders, and we thank you. We're trying to absorb as many questions as we can. And as Stephanie Baxter spoke to this evening, some of the questions we're just trying to define what the answers may be. And as we said openly, this is all new uncharted waters, and we just want to make certain that when we reveal and send the plan out, that it is really calculated and addresses multiple avenues and multiple facets of questions related to the reopening. So this evening I'm going to go through a lot of information. I will share this on our district website and make certain that I send it to all of our employees, because it's going to be healthy in content this evening. All right, so overall, when we talk about building our reopening plan, we want to make certain that there's a foundation and that gives us a complete movement of action. So there's guiding principles that we want to make that have been clearly defined through our staff that will drive the work. And the first one is making certain that we protect the safety and security of all of our employees and our staff and our community members. It is one of our highest and greatest priorities within our organization. In addition to that, we're creating a reopening plan. We've got to make certain that we have high-level, consistent content instruction that takes place for every one of our learners, regardless if they elect to go to brick and mortar, or they elect to go to e-learning, or transition to a Hillsborough virtual school. Our job is to make certain that we have a multifaceted approach that has high-quality instruction for every one of our students. And then we want to make certain that we support any differentiation in the way that our learners want to and aspire to come back, and allow parents to have active choice in that conversation and in that piece. Hence the reason we created the Declaration of Intent, to better understand what the avenues that our parents want to select regarding to our work. And as healthy, being, having a healthy and safety being one of our greatest priorities, we want to make certain that the campus proactive steps are taken and protocols are in place to protect our learners and also the working conditions of our adults. So once again, we talked about today, we will have face coverings that will be implemented within our schools when we cannot provide and implement and observe social distancing. We will make sure that we install hand sanitizers in high traffic areas as we enter our schools, through our main office, throughout our hallways, transition into our gymnasium, potentially in our locker rooms, and at the same time in our lunchrooms, so those can be accessible for our learners. We will look to make certain we have deep cleaning, sanitation protocols. We will have ongoing professional development through our custodial staff, along with our safety and security staff, of what deep cleaning what it means, what will we look like, or our flexibility of our schedules. We may have to flex custodial staff schedules in order to make certain that we that we clean high touch surfaces along the way during schools. And we're going to make certain that we screen every one of our visitors and limit the movement for accessibility to our campuses. classes. And that we will, one of the other questions that we had last time was about our air conditioning systems to make certain that we have frequently replaced of HVAC systems. And then we're going to look at making certain that we limit the capacity in transitions in our confined spaces, such as our restrooms and other particular areas, so that we will make certain that we follow the CDC guidelines, and then we will initiate a tracking protocol for positive cases so that we can take proactive steps and that we can respond immediately, whether that's looping and coordinating efforts for our employees to be tested, and whether or not we have to, so if we have tested positive responses, we take swift and immediate actions to not only communicate that to every stakeholder, but be able to be prepared to shut down that particular wing, that site, in order to create the deep clean necessary to have a safe return for our learners. The other side of it, as you know, we have 90,000 students that transition every single day to and from our schools with our yellow fleet, and we once again will have PPE provided to every one of our learners as they transition onto the bus. It is logistically and physically impossible for social distancing to take place on a bus. I gave the analysis. It would close. We would need additional 2,000 buses to order, and on top of the cost related to employees and benefits, is close to $300 million that we would need in order to make sure we have that implementation plan regarding the 6 feet related to that effort. So we will continue to have sanitation protocols in place, and we will look at transportation to come, after we will touch and clean our buses after every completed route from to and from schools. And because we know that the routes are going to be our transition to middle school, to elementary, middle, and high school, to make sure that there's cleanliness taking place, and that we will create social distance where we can if we not have limited number of students that are transitioning to and from our schools. And then we will have staggered arrival and staggered dismissal protocols that we will work with our school-based leaders to make sure when buses arrive that we stagger release those individuals to intake them into our schools, and as buses are dismissed, that we will have staggered dismissals so that we do not have this clog and high traffic area of our students transition out to our buses, so it is a controlled environment to be able to better protect and serve our students. As relates to arrival dismissal, I just talked about making certain that our transitions are held healthy, to make certain that we are controlled. Parent pickup and drop-off procedures will be defined. We will work that over the next 72 hours to define, and those potentially could be morphed as this plan is fluid. We will have face covering for our staff, implementation where needed possible, where social distancing is not related. And then we're going to have signage. You'll start to see signage around our facilities, not only exterior, on the external of our facilities, but also internal facilities, to better help our students, to let them understand the pathway. We may have one directional hallways. We may have signals where students need to stand in order so they can have a better understanding of the pathways and movements within our organization. The biggest thing we want to make certain we do, the first layer of wellness, is for our parents to have and conduct wellness checks every single day. Ask our learners, how do they feel? Do they have symptoms? Take their temperatures so that when they are ready and primed physically, ready to come to school, so they do not expose our students and our employees to any type of contagion. So making certain that that's proactive steps embedded. And then the class environment. Once again, we'll have face coverings. We're going to do a really good job providing information to our employees about how to educate our students on proper hygiene. We will have frequent face covering events along the way, so they can take the time to have breaks. We will have increased hand washing breaks along the way for our students throughout the day. And that we're going to try to do our best to have digital instructional resources and one-to-one consumable materials that to allow our learners to interact with those type of texts. Not having, we will try to get as much as often as we can to our affordability standpoint, to have those consumables where students can have and take those type of learning instructional activities along the way. And then we could cohort our elementary classrooms of students to expose, to reduce exposure to other students and also to other employees as well. And we will maximize every student space space that we can. We'll have to redesign the way our classrooms look, because we know that one thing we do know in best practices is that graveyard rows do not work, because we want discourse and students to defend and interact every single day with content. So we're going to have to be creative about how the environment will be. In student protection, we will continue to make certain that sanitation is along the way with student stations. We will provide the necessary Lysol wipes as students transition to, individual conferences, small group instruction led by teachers, independent learning led as our student-led processes, and then we'll have students engage in technology, making sure we have the proper wipes when they finish engaging with that particular piece of equipment. And then we have to potentially look at whether we will have breakfast in the classroom, and I know that's going to have to be negotiated, but we will work with CTA along the way to make certain if that's a need, and then look at grab-and-go options for our students to have grab-and-go breakfast within our schools, and then looking at single directions I spoke to earlier. And then we're going to have to maximize not only inside lunchroom, breakfast and lunchroom opportunities, but also outside as well. Well, as I reported last board meeting, we have 56 elementary schools that will have coverings, and then which means we'll transition to all of our elementary schools to see if that could be a potential area or courtyard to be able to feed our students. And then staff, we're going to make sure we protect them along the way. We will have daily temperature checks for our staff as they transition to our schools. And one of the reasons we can't do students is that if you look at high schools, they have so many points of entry. Secondary schools, we just don't have enough staff to cover it. But that's why the self-checks are really important for our parents. But back to our staff, we will provide usable face coverings. We will provide continued, education on how to help them educate their students, because we want our students to own the cleanliness of their student stations. Not our teachers, but our students to wipe down equipment, materials, so that we are prepared for the next learner and prepared for the next day. And then being avid about sharing equipment, and then looking at physical barriers, looking at high traffic areas, about how we can protect our front office staff and ultimately protect our staff. And we'll work to make certain we have virtual meetings along the way. We know that if we can reduce and eliminate face-to-face meetings, we will. And we proved one thing during this pandemic, that virtual meetings are effective and efficient, and we thank our staff for being flexible in that time. And then meals, what are we going to do for meals? Because the lunchroom is going to be the greatest area where we are going to be unable to social distance. It's one of those areas where we're going to be an exemption for removing face cover, any face coverings. So we've got to be very strategic. It's very difficult to alter the lunch schedule. If you look at a high school, we already have a short window, and if we had to alter that schedule and start earlier in the morning and later in the afternoon, we would disrupt instructional time along the way. So we will increase signage about hygiene. We're making certain that we have manage alternative settings, and then explore in the classroom potentially as options where possible within our schools. And the other thing about before and after school activities, the question I got today from the Times was, are we going to participate in athletics as normal? And I would say nothing's going to return to normal at this point, but are we going to allow our students to actively engage in extracurricular activities? The answer to that is yes, we are. We will, and we will follow, guidelines by the Florida High School Athletic Association. They gave us a direct link to guidelines for every fall sport. We will follow those guidelines, and we will make that available in our FAQs so our parents have a better understanding of what those guidelines, how they will be followed and what the expectations are related to that work. And, we will conduct extracurricular activities virtual when feasible, but we will reduce before and after school, programs, ratios from teachers to students as much and often as we can in order to protect our learners. So I'm going to stop it there. I'm sorry, it's a lot today.
I'm wondering, Mr. Superintendent, this is a lot of information, which leads to a lot of questions.
Yes,
for almost every bullet point in your presentation.
Yes,
There's
ma'am.
probably 3 underlying questions
I know.
around that particular bullet point.
Yes, ma'am.
Would it make sense for, and I know that we're going to talk about extending the declaration of intent
Yes, ma'am.
to the 17th.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you think, and board members, this would just be something to ask you for consensus, that we need to have another reopening session or reopening the school's workshop next Tuesday before parents, the deadline for parents to decide whether or not they're sending their kid, or what their decision, what their choice is.
ma'am.
So at that, for just a moment, we can open it up to board comments or suggestions. But I just think there's a lot of information that and a lot of questions that people have, and it might be good to do it in a broadcasted
Yes, ma'am.
workshop setting like we did the first time. So I just want to get some feedback from my fellow board members on that if they think that might be a good idea. So Ms. Stewart.
Thank you. And I don't disagree with you. However, and I was going to ask for this when we get to questions, I actually think the amount of information and the amount of work that we need to do, I think it is actually behooving us to look at the calendar and talk about pushing back 2 weeks. I know the angst that gives you about instructional time, but this is so much for us to do, and try and do that in the next 2 to 3 weeks before teachers come back. And then we are roughly this week 1 month from students returning to school. And I just don't see how we can possibly not, this is a broad brush first glance. There are going to be so many issues that arise as we bring kids back into this system, and we're not doing slowly, we're doing it all on the same day. And so I don't know if we can talk about staggering. Elementary starts one day, middle starts a couple days later, high school starts a couple days later. Give us time to get into a routine of cleaning and what that looks like. I can't imagine that our custodial staff is it by any shape, in any shape or any means ready to do the necessary stuff that they're going to have to do. If you're depending on my 17-year-old to clean off a computer and a desk where he sat, I'm not following him, and I'm related to him. He's a 17-year-old boy. I just don't see how we can expect kids to sanitize and disinfect, and there's a difference between doing that. There's nothing in this yet that I've seen that talks about a timeline for how we put and I know that I don't want to discount anything that anyone has done, because I know there's been a lot of effort and a lot of energy put into this, and I appreciate that. I just think it is way too much too soon, and even just sitting here seeing it for the first time, I am thinking that teachers and administrators are going to be completely overwhelmed with what it is that they have to do in order to bring students back in, on top of managing a staff that is now a set of students and a body of students is going to be split in 3 different ways. So now you're managing a body of students that's coming on your campus with masks, potentially with health issues, potentially with sickness. You know, what do I do with the kids who are sick? Then you're going to have another whole set of e-learning kids that you're trying to manage as an administrator and teachers. And then you've got the virtual aspect as well. And I just think that it is way too much too soon. Delaying allows us time, and we need time right now. If we had started this back in April, May, March, right after this happened, and started talking about how we were going to open schools, but I know there's no way that we could have done that. So the statute allows us time. The only thing that the Florida statute, Law Code 1001.42 says that opening date for schools in the district may not begin earlier than August 10th. That's a lot of flexibility. And I know the reason that we open on August 10th, and I pushed for that back when we moved the calendar so that our students could have midterms before they left on winter break. We may not even, I don't want to see us also get into a situation, board, where we open and we're open 2 weeks and we have to shut down again, because that's disastrous for us and for the community. And I think we need to be confident in the steps that we take to opening. So I was going to actually ask you for a delay. I know we talked about it in the back room of 2 weeks. Let's delay until after Labor Day. I know that is not what our families want to hear, but I just don't think that the magnitude by which we have to do and the things we need to do in order to open schools is so great, just from the comments Ms. Snively just made and the way that I'm feeling sitting here, you know, and the things that I think we are going to have to do in order to manage this. And this is a big lift, and I think we need to get it right. We need to get it right the first time, knowing that there are going to be things. We haven't even gotten to the point of talking about what happens when you have an infected child or several infected children. And I don't want this to become, and I spoke with Dr. Wilson before I got here today. I don't want this to become such a stigma that then people don't report what is going on health-wise, because that would be disastrous. It would be. I don't want it to become like mental health, where people say, "I'm not sick," and they're very sick, or they have someone at home that's sick. So I was going to ask you for a delay in the commitment document, not for the commitment document to be so binding. I think that families need the opportunity to say, if I have a family member who gets sick, I may need to change my commitment.